The Torah tells us, Perek Chov Daled Pasuk Aleph, Avram Zokein Bo Bayomim. Avram was old, Bo Bayomim, he was advanced in age. Vashem Berachas Avram Bakol, and Hashem blessed Avram with everything. He had everything. So Rashi cites the famous midrash, Bakol Ole Bigematria Ben. The numerical value of Bakol is Ben. He had everything. Although Avram was a phenomenally wealthy man, he had the greatest acclaim in the world. But to Avram, what was Bakol? Ben. Everything means he had the son. Now that he has the son, he must find a wife. Now, we find that Avram initially, he had no son, and Hashem appears to him when he's 99 years old, and he says to him, your children will be, the land of Canaan is yours, and your children after you. And your children will be like the stars of the heavens, so on and so forth. So Avram says to Hashem, what is the value of all this bracha? I have no children. I have no children. My administrator, whom administers all my possessions, is going to be my heir, Damesek Eliezer. Who's Damesek Eliezer? The word Damesek could either mean Damascus, or Damesek is an acronym for Dodo Mashkabi Toraso Sharabo. Eliezer was so great in Torah that he drew from the wealth springs of his Rebbe, of his teacher. Also, he was to espouse monotheism. Dole Umashkim Toraso Sharabo. When he went out to impress upon the world monotheism, he drew from the wellsprings of his Rebbe. That was his level. And it says, Kol Mashe Lomad Limed. Whatever he learned from his teacher, he taught others. So he's going to be my heir. So firstly, when you speak to Hashem, do you have to identify him? Eliezer, or my administrator will be my heir. He only had one administrator. What did he have to identify him at that moment as Damesek Eliezer? Eliezer the Damascus. Doesn't make a difference where he came from. If he came from Alexandria or he came from wherever he may have come from, it was irrelevant. So why does Torah have to go? Avram, when he spoke to Hashem, he identified him as Damesek Eliezer. So Hashem says to Avram, Lo yirosh, this one will not be your heir. It says, he takes him outside and he shows him the stars and he says, although you're an expert astrologer, although the stars say, Avram ein lo ben, Avram will not have a son, Avraham yesh lo ben. Avram will have a son. Asher yetzi me'echa yiroshecha. The one who comes out of your innards, meaning your physical son will be your son. And that's there. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Avram that when he left, he says, three things you don't have now, but you will have. You will have children, you'll have wealth, and you'll have fame. This is before he left, Choram. He arrives, and it says, after Lot separates from him, Hashem says, to your progeny I will give this land. And Rashi, and it says, Vayiven Mizbeach, Avram builds an altar. So Rashi says, why did he build the altar? To acknowledge that Hashem is actually telling him he's having children. So Hashem said, you're having children. When he left, he says, you will have children. The land is given to your children. And now when he says the land is yours, and so on and so forth, and all of a sudden he says, but what's the value of all this blessing? Damesek Eliezer, Yorish Osi. Eliezer the Damascus will inherit me. What do you mean he'll inherit you? But Hashem says you can have children. What's even the consideration? So the way we explained it was, the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, based on a pasuk in the Torah tells us, Elo told us Moshe v'Aaron. These are the children of Moshe and Aaron, and then the Torah goes and only mentions Nodav Avihu, Elos v'Isamar. But And Rashi cites the Midrash asks immediately. We're speaking about the children of Moshe, and the only children which are mentioned are the four sons of Aaron. Dosan Aviram, not Dosan Aviram, Nadav Avihu, Elozvi Somer. They're the only ones. So Rashi cites the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Kol HaMelamed Torah leben Chavero, one who teaches a fellow son Torah, it's Kilu Yoldo. It's as if you actually gave birth to that person. So the way I explained it was, what is the essence of a person? The essence of a person is his spirituality, not his physicality. So therefore, the one who mentors that person, especially if he becomes Rabbi Muvok, if the primary Torah which he has is only due to that teacher, he gave him his essence. His whole essence is due to that teaching. So therefore, the Torah identifies the sons of Aaron as if they are the sons of Moshe. Because Kol HaMelamed Torah leben Chavero, Kilu Yoldo. Now, who was the so-called Talmud Muvok? Who was the spiritual protege of Avram Avinu? Eliezer. He was called Damesik Eliezer because he was Dola Mashka B'Torah Sharabo, because he drew from the wellsprings of his Rebbe's Torah to espouse to the world monotheism. The Midrash tells us that when Eliezer went to Choron to negotiate for the hand of Rivka, and Lavan initially saw him, he thought he actually saw Avram Avinu. When it says he had the camels, he thought, why do you think he saw Avram Avinu? Because he radiated a holiness which was a semblance of Avram's holiness. I mean, due to the mentoring of Torah and the amount of Torah which he absorbed from Avram Avinu, he radiated a spirituality similar to Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the level and the impact and the effect Avram had on Eliezer's life. So therefore, when Avram speaks to God and he says, who's going to be my heir? Damesik Eliezer. The reason why he's referred to over there, Damesik Eliezer, is because Damesik is alluding that he's Dol Mashka B'Torah Sharabo. Because he is my spiritual heir. Because HaMelamed Torah ben Chaver is Kilu Yoldo. That's what Avram was saying to Hashem. Echaz v'sholom. Hashem is keeping his word. Because Eliezer became his spiritual heir. Maybe when he says you will have children, you'll be able to establish this dimension of child, and that's what it's going to be. He says, but what's it worth? But it's not my physical child. Hashem says, don't worry. Although the stars say, Avram ein lo ben, Avram yesh lo ben. Asher yetzi mecha yirashecha. The one who will come out of your innards, that person will be heir. Okay? So it's not Chas v'Sholom. Avram questioned Hashem whether he was carrying out his word or not. That's the way he internalized it and understood it. But what was confirmed then, that a Klal Yisrael, the patriarch of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people, has to have the genetics of Avram. It cannot be Eliezer. Eliezer is what? Eliezer is a Kanani. He's a descendant of Chum. He comes from a cursed stock. Avram already had an understanding that although Eliezer is this very special person, and he has the special dimension of spirituality, factually, that something has to do with what you've accomplished. But the innateness, the genealogy that you have a cursed genealogy. Because Chum is Orur, and Avram is Baruch. Because Avram was a descendant of Shem. So at that moment, he already understood Ein Baruch mistabik bebaruch, Ein Orur mistabik baruch. A person of a cursed stock cannot cleave to a blessed stock. So when Avram commissioned Eliezer to go seek a wife for Yitzchok, Eliezer asked the question, Ulai lo sova isha lech sachroi. He gave him all the preconditions, and he says, but maybe the woman is not going to want to come back. Maybe. So the word Ulai, it's spelled in a deleted form. The vav is not there. So without the vowels, it could be read Eli. So Rashi cites the medrash on that word, Eli, that Avram understood from very often the person asks a question, the question is coming from a certain source. So Avram says, I understand why you're asking that question. You're asking that question because you have a special daughter who's a tzadekis, who's devoutly righteous, and you're questioning, why do you have to send me to the other end of the world to find a wife for your son, Eli, it's right here. I have my own daughter. And she's devout, holy, also radiates holiness. So what does Avram say to Eliezer? Ein orim izdabik bebaruch. You're of a cursed stock. Your daughter, in terms of her share in the world to come, could be phenomenal and enormous. But to build a Klal Yisrael, to create and establish an eternal people at that special level, they have to come from blessed stock. They cannot come. And if you have a patriarch, you need a matriarch who possesses the same spiritual genealogy. Therefore, the only one who is qualified to be the matriarch is only from my family, and your wife and your daughter does not qualify. But where did he have this eye-opener? Where did he understand this with such profound clarity? It's because initially he had thought Eliezer would be his heir, based on the principle of Lami Torah Leben Chaveru Kol Yoldo. Hashem says, no, it's your child, your physical child. Therefore, as a result of that, as Rashi says here, he's zoked, he says, Hashem Berech Avram Bakol. God blessed him with everything, and what is Bakol? Numerically, Ben. Now that he has a Ben, Tzorch Lasiu Isha. Now he has to find a qualified matriarch, because a patriarch without a matriarch, you don't have a Jewish people. Therefore, that's the reason why he said all these preconditions to Eliezer, and he adjured him that he can't deviate from his instruction, and only then, because only that woman is qualified to be the matriarch.